So the first question is we can call broadly the cosmological question. Where did all of this come from?
La primera es cosmológica. ¿De dónde viene todo esto?
And the next one we can call the epistemological question. How do we know anything?
La segunda es epistemológica. ¿Cómo sabemos algo?
And the next question is the ontological question. Like, who am I? What am I?
La tercera es la ontológica. ¿Quién soy? ¿Qué soy?
The next has to do with the soteriological, which is really, it's a study of, soteriology is the study of salvation. So in that sense, it's just answering this question, why am I here?
La cuarta es la soteriológica, supongo que existe en español, la primera vez que lo veo. ¿Por qué estoy aquí? Y soteriología tiene que ver con la salvación.
And then the last question deals with the eschatological, where am I going?
Y la quinta se atiende a la escatológica, ¿a dónde voy?
So these are questions that have been, I think, very clearly answered, at least within the Islamic tradition, and this will connect to these matters related to the Filaha tradition and to permaculture. But I think this really lays it out, I think, pretty clearly. This is a quote from a scholar named Al-Raghib al-Isfahani, and this is from a book that was the translation of the book. The title, "The Path to the Noble Qualities or the Virtues of the Sacred Law," and really what this portion of the book is really talking about, addressing the questions that were just asked. Why are we here? What are we supposed to be doing? And ultimately, what should we be busying ourselves with?
Entonces estas 5 preguntas han sido, tienen muchas respuestas desde la tradición islámica, y esta es una citación de un libro por Abul Qasim al-Hussein ibn Muhammad o Al-Raghib al-Isfahani, de un libro que el título se traduce como El camino hacia las cualidades nobles de la ley sagrada, y se atiende a estas 5 preguntas, y como en este contexto vamos a hablarlo en cómo tiene que ver con la tradición agrícola, el filaha.
So he begins with the quote: "Man, or the human being, has 3 specific functions. The first is to cultivate and prosper in the earth. Imarat al-ard. Imarat al-ard."
Empieza así: el hombre o la humanidad tiene 3 funciones específicas. La primera es de cultivar y prosperar en la tierra. Imarat al-ard.
And he cites the Quranic verse here. It says, which is stated in the verse, "He brought you out from the earth and made you inhabited."
Y él cita un versículo del Corán que dice: Él te ha sacado de la tierra y ha hecho que lo habite, la habite.
He should obtain his livelihood from earth for himself and others.
Debería de sacar su provecho de la tierra para sí mismo y para los otros, para los demás.
The second is to worship God, or to be devoted to God, as is stated, "I have not created jinn and mankind except to worship me," me being God.
La segunda es de adorar a Dios, como se dice también en el Corán: yo no he creado a los jinn, los genios, y a la humanidad salvo para adorarme.
This means man should obey God's commandments and prohibitions. The third is his vicegerency, which is mentioned in, "And I will make you successors in the land, and then I will observe what you will do."
Esto quiere decir que el hombre debería de obedecer a los mandamientos y prohibiciones de Dios. Y la tercera función es su vicegerencia, ¿está bien? ¿Está bien dicho? Que se menciona en este versículo: y yo os haré sucesores en la tierra, y luego os observaré lo que hacéis, lo que haréis.
This vicegerency is the imitation of God in accordance with man's ability to rule, by applying the noble qualities of the law.
Esta vicegerencia es la imitación de Dios de acuerdo con la capacidad del humano a regir, reinar, aplicando las nobles cualidades de la ley.
And this is the important part, which are wisdom, justice, forbearance, beneficence, and graciousness.
Y estas son, y esa es la parte importante, la sabiduría, la justicia, la clemencia, beneficencia y graciousness. Gracia, ¿no? Gracia.
Their purpose is to gain paradise in proximity to God.
El propósito de todo esto es de ganar el paraíso y proximidad a Dios.
Now, keep this in mind, because what we're going to look at next is, this is an article that was written by a friend of ours, colleague, Dr. Uthman Abdurrahman Llewellyn, and this is a quote from a piece that he wrote about Islamic jurisprudence in relation to, and how it relates to environmental planning. And so the qualities and the things that were mentioned in the Al-Isfahani quote really are brought to bear on what's written here.
Y estas cualidades que se mencionan en la citación anterior, ahora se ve cómo se atienden al filaja, ¿no? A cómo tratar con el medio ambiente.
So, an Islamic philosophy of the use of land and water, plants and animals may be described in light of the objectives of Islamic law.
Una filosofía islámica del uso de la tierra y el agua, las plantas y los animales, se pueden describir en vista de los objetivos de la ley islámica.
All creatures are sustained by one Rabb, or Lord, and sustainer.
Todas las criaturas son sostenidos por un Rab o ¿cómo se dice? El Rab, el sustentador, ¿no?
And he has created them in measure and proportion and has ordered and balanced them so as to sustain them by means of each other.
Y él los ha creado en perfecto equilibrio y los han ordenado y equilibrado para que para sostenerles por medio de uno al otro. ¿Se entiende?
Nothing is created without value and purpose.
Nada está creado sin valor ni propósito.
The purpose of each creature is to serve the sustainer of all by filling its ordained role.
El propósito de cada criatura es de servir al sustentador de todo por cumplir su papel ordenado,
thereby contributing to the cosmic design and purpose and to the welfare of the totality.
y así contribuir al diseño y propósito cósmico y al bienestar de la totalidad.
All beings are thus united in aim.
Todos los seres son así unidos en su propósito.
And benefiting the whole is a value that pervades the universe.
Y dar beneficio al todo es un valor que pervade el universo. ¿Se dice así? Pervade.
For human beings, this role is expanded to the special responsibility of trusteeship, amana and khilafa, over the earth.
Para los seres humanos, este papel se expande a la responsabilidad especial de amana y khilafa sobre la tierra. Quiere decir ser como vicegerente o cuidador.
Ihsan, the most comprehensive term expressing nobility, denotes the perfection of moral rightness, practical benefit, and aesthetic artistry.
Ihsan, el término más comprensivo que expresa nobilidad, quiere decir la perfección de la rectitud moral, beneficio práctico y artesanía estética o arte estética.
And is due from human beings toward everything.
Y está debido desde los humanos hacia todo.
For the essence of worship, and this is important, for the essence of worship is to do the greatest good to the entire creation.
Porque la esencia de la adoración es de hacer el mayor bien a toda la creación.
And I think that last part is I think it deserves repeating, because if one of the purposes of the existence of the human being is to worship God, right? What constitutes worship?
Y esa es la parte más importante de todo, porque habiendo visto lo anterior, si el propósito de ser humano es de adorar a Dios, entonces esta es la esencia de esa adoración, es de hacer el mayor bien a toda la creación.
And I think what Abdurrahman says here, for the essence of worship is to do the greatest good to the entire creation, is I think a very important point in clarifying what the essence of worship is, what is at the heart of worship.
Y eso es un punto muy importante, importantísimo, como apunta a la esencia de la adoración.
Okay, so I think, again, in seeing the quote from Al-Raghib al-Isfahani and what is explained here from Abdurrahman Llewellyn, I think it fleshes out more of what, again, lies at the heart of what we see exemplified by the Filaha tradition, and particularly what was accomplished in Al-Andalus.
Viendo estas dos citaciones, podemos entender mejor la tradición de Filaha y también lo que se ha logrado aquí, lo que se logró durante la época del Andalus.
Great. So I think this next slide is sort of the payoff, so to speak. Ihsan is translated into explicit administrative goals and legally enforceable principles through the duties of Islah: rightness, beneficiality, suitability, betterment of conditions, cultivation of earth, and establishment of peace, prosperity, and civilization.
Ihsan se traduce como objetivos, gracias, metas administrativas concretas y principios que se pueden legalmente imponer a través de los los deberes del Islah, o sea, rectitud, beneficialidad. No, suitability es como sí, como que ser apropiado, mejora de condiciones, cultivo de la tierra y el establecimiento de paz, prosperidad y civilización.
If the primary objective of Islamic law is to realize ihsan and maximize the welfare of the creation, the purposes of environmental planning may be defined as islah, revival of dead lands, ihya al-mawat, and tahsin al-ard, enrichment, enhancement, and beautification of the earth.
Si el primer objetivo de la ley islámica es de realizar ihsan, o sea, excelencia, y maximizar el bienestar de la creación, los objetivos de environmental planning. This is really hard. Planeamiento en planificación ambiental, ¿sí? Se pueden definir como islah, o sea, revivificación de las tierras muertas, ihya al-mawad, y tahsin al-ard, enriquecimiento, ensalzamiento y embellecimiento de la tierra.
The Prophet Muhammad, on whom be blessings and peace, declared that thus fructifying the earth is a profoundly ethical act.
El profeta Muhammad, que la paz y declaró que así fructificar la tierra es un acto profundamente ético.
So the two following hadith, I think, makes this very clear. Whoever revives dead land, for him or her, is reward in it, and whatever any creature seeking food eats of it shall be reckoned as charity from him or her.
Quien revive tierra muerta, para él o para ella hay un beneficio, una recompensa en eso. Y cualquier criatura que busca comida y come de esa planta o de esa tierra, eso se va a contar como caridad de esa persona que ha revivificado la tierra. Este es un hadith, un dicho del profeta Muhammad.
And the second hadith, there is no Muslim who plants a tree or sows a field, and a human, bird, or animal eats from it, but it shall be reckoned as charity from him or her.
Otro hadith, que no hay un musulmán o musulmana que siembra o que planta un árbol o siembra un campo y un humano o ave o animal come de eso, pero eso se va a contar como caridad de él o ella.
Right. So I believe these quotes make it clear that there is something elemental about the sort of the mission of our species that involves our ability to make real, again, these principles that would allow us to be able to serve these functions, to perform these tasks.
Desde estas citaciones podemos ver que hay algo elemental en nuestro propósito, ¿no? De para qué estamos aquí.
Now here's another quote, and this is from another scholar that has a history here. This is quoting the thought of Ibn Arabi on the benefit of knowledge. And again, this is very important because one of the things that is being pointed to here is this concept of adab, right? Being capable, being willing, prioritizing, putting things in their proper place, putting things where they belong.
Esta es otra citación de un traductor, William Chittick, que ha trabajado mucho traduciendo a Ibn Arabi. Y aquí se ve la importancia del adab. El adab quiere decir como la etiqueta o las modales, buenos modales, pero también quiere decir como poner las cosas en su sitio, hacer todo bien.
Actually, with that, what I would like to ask, can anyone tell me the definition of oppression?
¿Alguien puede dar la definición de la opresión?
Treating things other than they truly are.
Treating things other than they truly are, or to put things in places other than where they belong.
Poner las cosas donde no deberían de estar.
That's oppression. To put things in places other than where they belong. Okay. So with that, all of creation makes demands upon man because he is created in God's form and has been appointed his vicegerent or khalifa.
Toda la creación hace una demanda, ¿se dice así? Sobre el hombre. Puede pedir algo del hombre porque ha sido creado en la forma de Dios y ha sido dado el papel de su vicegerente o jalifa.
He has the God-given duty woven into his original created nature, or fitra, to recognize the haq, or the right, of things and to act accordingly.
Él tiene el deber dado por Dios, entretejido en su naturaleza original con el cual se ha creado su fitra de reconocer el haq, el derecho de las cosas y de actuarse conforme a eso.
It is this haq that must be known if his knowledge is to be true, right, worthy, and appropriate.
Es este haq, este derecho que se tiene que conocer si su conocimiento va a ser correcto, verdadero, correcto, worthy, valioso, seguro, y apropiado.
For this haq is identical with the khalq, or the creation that God has established. And I think that I should also mention that haq, we could also render that word into the truth of a thing.
Porque este haq es idéntico con el khalq, la creación que Dios ha establecido. Y cabe destacar que haq también se puede traducir como la verdad. Puede decir o derecho o también verdad.
And so in short, beneficial knowledge is knowledge of the what and the why of ourselves and of things.
Brevemente, el conocimiento beneficioso es el conocimiento de el qué y el por qué de nosotros mismos y de las cosas.
In order to know a thing truly and benefit from the knowledge, we need to know what it is, which is its reality, and which is nothing but its khalq, or its creation, and its haq, or its right, or truth.
Para que conozcamos una cosa verdaderamente y que beneficiamos del conocimiento de eso, debemos de saber qué es su realidad, su haqiqa, que es nada más que su khalq, su naturaleza y su haq, su verdad.
And we need to know how we should respond to it.
Y debemos de saber cómo deberíamos responder.
What exactly does it demand from us rightly, truly, and appropriately?
¿Qué es lo que pide de nosotros? Verdaderamente, rightly, truly, and appropriately. Con derecho, en verdad y apropiadamente.
Right, so, and I'll just skip down to the last sentence, because basically he's saying the realization is to know things as they truly are and to act appropriately in every circumstance.
La realización es conocer las cosas como realmente son y actuarse apropiadamente en cada circunstancia.
Right. So the question is, what does that have to do with filah?
Entonces podemos preguntar ¿por qué eso tiene que ver con cómo tiene que ver con la filaja?
Well, the question that occurred to me in reading these things is, well, what if you were able to actually operationalize all of these understandings? What could you produce from that?
Lo que él se ha preguntado es ¿cómo sería si cogemos todo esto y lo ponemos en la práctica?
And I think this would be a good time to actually get into some quotes from this book. It's called Reconstruction by Way of the Soil. And it was written by a British author. He's actually an agronomist. He's someone who was very instrumental in the modern organic movement, agriculture movement, named G.T. Wrench, or Guy Theodore Wrench. And when you read his book's called Reconstruction by Way of the Soil. It's basically a historical survey of sort of civilizational outcomes as seen through the eyes of agriculture.
Sorry, could you repeat that?
This book, Reconstruction by Way of the Soil, is a historical survey of civilizational outcomes as seen through the eyes or through the lens of agriculture.
Este libro es como un resumen histórico de ¿cómo se dice eso?
Resultados
De los resultados de civilizaciones visto por la lente de la agricultura. Gracias.
Right. So, actually, as you're reading this account in the book, and most of the accounts that he quotes in this book are actually the histories that were recorded by European historians in mostly in the late 19th century. It almost sounds like some kind of fantasy of what he writes about what happened in Muslim Spain. Doesn't even sound real.
Que la mayoría de las historias que recoge este libro se tratan de historias de Europa de finales del siglo XIX, pero cuando cuenta la historia de Al-Ándalus parece como una cuenta de hadas, porque es tan diferente.
Because basically what he records in this book is sort of his disaster after disaster after disaster. And as he goes around the world and he looks at what's happened to all of these societies that have basically ruined themselves with this mismanagement of their lands.
Porque está recogiendo historias de desastre tras desastre de gente que han cuidado sus tierras muy mal y se han prácticamente destrozado en el camino, en el proceso.
Until he comes to Moorish Spain.
Hasta que llega al Andalus, a la España islámica.
Right. So he begins, it is refreshing and an essential restoration of the mind to turn from the dismal tale of farming under modern civilization and to review in its place a kingdom of agricultural art in Western Europe.
Dice, refresca y también es una restauración esencial de la mente de dejar la historia triste de agricultura bajo civilización moderna y de mirar en su lugar un reino de arte agricultural en Europa occidental.
Such a kingdom can be found, but one has to go back 1,000 years to find it.
Tal reino se puede encontrar, pero uno tiene que remontar 1000 años para encontrarlo.
Further, apart from this long interval of time, there are other distances between this great agricultural society and the society of modern Europe.
Además, aparte de este intervalo largo del tiempo, hay otras distancias entre esta gran sociedad agricultural y la sociedad de la Europa moderna.
And so it's interesting, again, the way he kind of, the terms he uses as he continues on, I think it kind of dates it, but anyway. The race which directed this society is no longer to be found in Europe.
Aquí se nota en qué época estaba escribiendo, porque habla de los musulmanes de España como una raza distinta. Pero bueno, dice, la raza que dirigió esta sociedad ya no se puede encontrar en Europa.
Moreover, the religious faith which directed it is now only to be found in a few mountainous areas of Eastern Europe.
Y además, la fe religiosa que la dirigió, ahora únicamente se puede encontrar en algunas zonas montañosas de la Europa oriental.
In its racial and religious characteristics, then, this society was strange to Europe. Yet, in spite of this strangeness, perhaps because of it, it did for a period attain to a fullness of civilization not reached by any other European people.
En sus cualidades raciales y religiosas, entonces, esta sociedad era extraña a Europa, pero a pesar de esta strangeness, rareza, o quizás por ella, ha logrado durante un periodo una llenura, ¿se dice así? Una plenitud, gracias, una plenitud de civilización que ningún otro pueblo europeo ha logrado.
This kingdom was that of the Arabs in Spain. I mean, just replace Arabs with Muslims, right? This kingdom was that of the Arabs in Spain, which began with their invasion under Tariq ibn Ziyad in 711 AD, and came to an end with the fall of Granada in 1472.
Este reino era el de los árabes en España. En realidad no eran árabes, bueno, apenas, había mucha mezcla, que empezó con su invasión bajo Tariq ibn Ziyad en el año 711 después de Cristo y llegó a su fin con la caída de Granada en 1472.
Right.
90, sí, es un error, 92 debería de ser. He made a mistake. It should be
This is 1492, right, yeah. So for whatever reason, he has 1472 in the book. But its period of harmony by no means extended for the whole of this term of 7.5 centuries.
Su periodo de armonía no se extendió por el total de este periodo de 7 siglos y medio.
Yeah, so just, you know, this is, for whatever reason, he cites 1472 as being the date, but
Sí, no sabemos por qué ha puesto esa fecha, pero en realidad era
we'll try to give him
92.
We'll give him a pass.
We'll give him a break.
So some of the books that are quoted in this text, and one in particular that is quoted quite often is this book written by Samuel Parsons Scott, or S.P. Scott, History of the Moorish Empire in Europe. It's a 3-volume set, and I think it was published in 1904, if I remember correctly.
Este es otro libro que también habla mucho de esta misma época. Se escribió por Samuel Parsons Scott y se publicó en el año 1904. ¿Ha dicho, no?
I think it's 1904, if I remember correctly. So, and another book that's actually cited, and I think there's some really interesting source material that's cited in this book. This is another one, The Making of Humanity, by Robert Briffault.
Este es otro, The Making of Humanity, el hacer de la humanidad.
So here Briffault says, the debt of our science to that of the Arabs does not exist in startling discoveries or revolutionary theories. Science owes a good deal more to Arab culture. It owes its existence. What we call science arose in Europe as a spirit of inquiry, of new methods of investigation, of the method of experiment, observation, measurement, of the development of mathematics in a form unknown to the Greeks. That spirit and these methods were introduced into the European world by the Arabs and again, by the Muslims. Right.
La deuda de nuestra ciencia, lo que debe nuestra ciencia a la de los árabes, no existe en descubrimientos sorprendentes ni teorías revolucionarias, sino que la ciencia debe mucho más a la cultura árabe, debe su existencia. Lo que llamamos la ciencia surgió en Europa como un espíritu de inquiry, ¿cómo se dice? Investigación, sí, de nuevos métodos de investigación. El método de experimentar, observar, medir el desarrollo de la matemática en una forma que los griegos no conocieron. Este espíritu y estos métodos lo introdujeron al mundo europeo los árabes.
This quote is from a Monsieur Gustave Le Bon. The Arabs had even a greater aptitude for agriculture than for letters and arts. What means of irrigation are now found in Andalucía were made by them. Again, this is 1884.
Este también es un texto muy viejo de 1884. Los árabes tenían una aptitud para la agricultura aún mayor que para las letras y los artes. Las formas de irrigación, de regar, ¿no? Riego, que se encuentran actualmente en Andalucía, lo hicieron ellos, lo desarrollaron ellos.
So there's a Monsieur Cédillo, somebody who has to correct my French. In short, they had irrigated and cultivated the land so excellently that it was befitting to call Andalucía a garden.
habían regado y cultivado la tierra tan bien, con tanta excelencia, que merecía llamar a Andalucía un jardín.
Agriculture and horticulture were developed to an extent never heard of before. It's Martin Hume.
La agricultura y horticultura lo desarrollaron a un punto nunca visto antes, con anterioridad.
So one of the things that actually is mentioned in the book, and I'll show you the book well, you saw the cover, but I just want to pull up some of the text. One of the things that's mentioned in this particular book is at the time that these systems, this filaha was actually being developed and applied in Spain. The four most populous countries in Europe at the time were England, France, Germany, and Italy. And apparently, during this time, if you were to, and here's the quote, if you were to total the populations of those four countries, you had maybe 15 to 20 million people. At the same time, in Spain, Arabic Spain, Muslim Spain, you had a population that's estimated of 30 million people. 30 million. So you had more people here in Muslim Spain than you had in the four most populous countries of
What were the
Europe.
countries? France, Germany?
England, France, Germany, and Italy.
What was the era?
This is, so what he calls basically what were the Dark Ages in Europe.
Dark Ages or Middle Ages?
Well, I'm sorry, Middle Ages, but he calls it the Dark Ages, the Dark Middle Ages, the Dark Middle Ages.
Volviendo al primer libro que ha citado, el autor dice que durante la media edad, en los 4 países más poblados de esa época, de Inglaterra, Francia, Alemania y Italia, tenían en total entre 15 hasta 20 millones de personas de la población. Mientras tanto, en España islámica habían 30 millones.
So it begs the question, okay, what made it possible? What was the thing that made it possible for 30 million people to be here doing all the wonderful stuff they were doing, right? While, the rest of the continent is, not doing too well.
Entonces nos hacen preguntarnos cómo es posible que un país que no es mucho más, es del mismo tamaño como Francia prácticamente, cómo ha podido apoyar tal población, mientras que el resto de Europa, el norte, estaban sufriendo, tenían mucha pobreza, mucha hambre.
So there must have been a system of provisioning that allowed for this population to not only exist, be able to have basic lives, but to actually thrive, because this was a place that was bursting forth with all kinds of innovative and special developments as far as offering people new opportunities for human beings to live a life of beauty and splendor and just wonder, and it all issued forth from this ability to kind of broker this partnership with the place that they found themselves living in, and that place was made better for having had them there.
Okay, I have to get back a little bit now.
Okay, sorry. I can say it more simply.
Good, waxing lyrical is good.
Yeah.
Entonces tenían que tener un sistema para proveer, para dar provisiones a tantas personas, y de no solo sobrevivir, sino vivir en abundancia, tener belleza, tener jardines, o sea que era una zona frondosa, con muchas plantas, muchas frutas, campos. Entonces tenía que tener una forma de hacer esto.
So, for example, one of the books that S.P. Scott quotes from is the book, the Kitab al-Filaha, which might be the most well-known of the books of Filaha, written by Ibn al-Awam from Sevilla.
Entonces el autor habla del Kitab al-Filaha, el libro del Filaha, la agricultura, por Ibn al-Awwam de Sevilla, que es es básicamente el libro de esa época más conocida, más
So
famoso.
he begins here. He says, the great work of Ibn al-Awwam of Seville, a vast monument of industry and erudition embracing every conceivable branch of the subject, shows to what extraordinary perfection the science of agriculture had been carried in the 12th century by the Spanish Mohammedans.
El gran trabajo de Ibn al-Awwam de Sevilla, que es un monumento increíble de industria y erudición que abarca todas las ramas imaginables del tema, enseña hasta qué nivel de perfección extraordinaria los musulmanes de España habían llevado la ciencia de la agricultura en el siglo XII.
It treats in a comprehensive and exhaustive manner not only of the methods found by the experience of centuries to be the best adapted to the sowing and harvesting of grain, to the planting and cultivation of orchards, to the propagation of edible and aromatic plants, right? But it also, with infinite minuteness of detail, describes the breeding and care of every species of domestic animals, their qualities, their relative excellence, their defects, their habits, their diseases.
Okay.
I'm sorry.
Trata de una manera comprensiva y exhaustiva no tan solo de los métodos encontrados por la experiencia de los siglos a ser los mejores adaptados a la siembra y la cosecha de los granos, pero también plantar y cultivo de huertos, la propagación de plantas comestibles y aromáticas, pero también con detalles minuciosos describe cómo criar y cuidar cada especie de animales domesticados, sus cualidades, sus excelencias relativas, sus defectos, sus hábitos y sus enfermedades.
It discourses at length upon the different breeds of horses and upon the rearing of that useful animal so prized by the Arabs.
Habla mucho sobre las diferentes razas de caballos y sobre su cría, la cría de ese animal tan cotizado por los árabes.
It explains the details of artificial incubation, a process borrowed from Egypt.
Explica los detalles de la incubación artificial, un proceso que lo tomaron de Egipto.
It directs how to produce in geese the abnormal hepatic conditions. I'm not expecting you to translate that. The abnormal hepatic conditions which induce the foie gras. I've had my French students pronounce. Yes, that's exactly what they corrected my French on that one too. Foie gras. That artificial delicacy so dear to the epicure, and 1,000 years ago, as today, an invaluable adjunct to fashionable gluttony.
Lo siento que lo mío no es tan evocativo como el suyo. Explique cómo producir en los gansos las condiciones anormales hepáticas que induce la foie gras, que crea foie gras. Tiene un nombre en español, ¿no?
Foie gras.
Foie gras,
Is there-
se entiende. Este manjar artificial que adora tanto el epicurio, y hace 1000 años hasta hoy en día es un compañero valioso a fashionable gluttony. ¿Cómo se dice eso?
Speaks for itself.
La moda, o sea, la moda de comer cosas especiales.
It teaches the different methods of cooking and the preparation of various confections, jellies, syrups, and sweetmeats of every description.
Enseña los diferentes métodos de cocinar y preparar varias confecciones, jaleas, jarabes y dulces de todo tipo.
The manufacture of wine, so rigidly forbidden to the Muslim. and whose immense consumption had already, in the time of the Caliphate, scandalized the pious.
La fábrica del vino tan rígidamente prohibida a los musulmanes y cuyo consumo inmenso ya había en el tiempo del califato escandalizado a los píos.
Is detailed in all its stages in this remarkable book.
Todo esto se detalla en todas sus fases y etapas en este libro tremendo.
In it are given recipes for cordials of many kinds.
También da recetas para cordiales. Cordiales se dice como jarabes para hacer bebidas.
Cooling beverages and hydromel.
Y bebidas que refrescos y hidromiel.
It also prescribes the rules by which the household of the farmer should be governed and defines the reciprocal duties of employer and employee.
También prescribe las normas por las cuales la casa del granjero debería gobernarse y define los deberes reciprocales del ¿cómo se dice? El empleador y el empleado, gracias.
In every operation of rural life and domestic economy, it enforces by repeated admonition the necessity for cleanliness, system, and order.
En cada operación de la vida rural,
I'm sorry. I did. I'm sorry. I think
I'm lost.
No, don't worry about it. We got you. Oh, here we go. On the bottom here.
En cada operación de la vida rural y la economía doméstica refuerza por admonición repetida la necesidad de limpieza, sistema y orden.
So, just to spare you going through more of the detail of the chapter, it basically uses this amazing, flowery, wonderful language to describe everything that was happening in Al-Andalus. But what's interesting about the book is that in the following chapter, the author, because he wants to know where did all of this come from, he actually proceeds to provide a retelling of the seerah of the Prophet Muhammad.
Lo curioso es que después de contar todo esto, el autor está buscando el porqué, cómo era posible hace 1000 años todo esto, ¿no? Y se pone a contar la historia de la vida del profeta Muhammad.
Right, because there's something about this, there's something about the individual who inspired this society to put forth the effort to create this system that somehow people believed in him and his ideas and his teaching so much that they invested themselves to create it. And then you saw what it produced.
Que él vio que había algo en esa persona que había inspirado a tantas personas de invertir su energía y todo su sudor, su tiempo, su sangre, energía, sus vidas en crear algo de tanta abundancia y belleza.
And I think just to quickly a quote, and this is a quote that's actually taken from a book of an author named Amir Ali Sayyid, who wrote a book called The Spirit of Islam in 1922. And he quotes what it was, in his estimation, that sparked what was seen in Al-Andalus.
Y él se refiere a un autor, Amir Ali Sayyid, que escribió El Espíritu del Islam, un libro en 1922.
So he basically said that Muhammad, the Prophet Muhammad, was the first statesman to introduce decency of human conduct in every department of society.
Y dice que su primera cualidad, a mi parecer, se puede explicar como que Muhammad era el primer statesman, como hombre de Estado, que introdujo decencia,
Sí.
¿se dice? Decencia de la conducta humana en todos los departamentos de la sociedad, en los aspectos de la sociedad.
He left no class of human beings out of his thought.
Que no dejó atrás ninguna clase de seres humanos.
He was, I feel, unquestionably the greatest humane, constructive statesman in history.
Era, pienso yo, sin duda, el hombre de Estado más humano y constructivo en la historia.
Right now, again, this is quoting. I mean, this is a British author.
Este es un autor británico, no
Right.
musulmán.
He's writing this in the 1940s. This book was published in 1946.
Y publicó este libro en 1946.
So, I mean, I just found this remarkable that the author felt in this text that was being written about history as seen through the eyes of agriculture, felt it necessary to dedicate an entire chapter of this book to a retelling of the emergence of Islam and the life of the Prophet Muhammad.
Es muy interesante que este autor, que está hablando de la agricultura, pero él vio necesario dedicar un capítulo entero de su libro sobre cómo empezó el Islam.
Right. So what is this? What is the source? What is the core ethos of this decency of human conduct seen in every department of society? What is the animating idea?
Él estaba buscando el germen de la idea de dónde ha venido esta decencia de la conducta humana en todos los aspectos de la sociedad.
I would suggest that it is the version of the golden rule as expressed in the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, right, where he says, "None of you truly believes unless you wish for your brother or sister, or you wish for yourself."
Él sugiere que eso viene del hadith, del dicho del profeta Muhammad, que es como una expresión del golden rule, ¿cómo se dice? La ley de oro, la regla de oro, ¿no? De compasión, ¿no? Ninguno de vosotros cree hasta que quiere para su hermano lo que quiere para sí mismo.
And what had occurred to me when I was reading this, and I was thinking about the history of, what had occurred here in Al-Andalus, yani, was these people actually believed that. They actually believed that.
Lo que se le ocurrió es que esta gente realmente creía en eso.
Like, it wasn't just like some saying.
No era solo un dicho.
Like, they actually believed it.
Realmente lo creyeron.
Like, to the point that they systematized the ethic.
Hasta tal punto que han sistematizado esta ética.
Like, they wrote tomes,
Escribieron
books,
muchos volúmenes
volumes on the basis of belief in that statement.
sobre su creencia en este dicho.
And I mean, and to my mind, it's the example that's provided by Al-Andalus that shows proof positive what happens when you operationalize this kind of ethical sensibility.
Y para él, Al-Andalus es la prueba de lo que ocurre cuando uno toma esta ética y lo pone en la práctica.
Right? It's this operationalizing of a good intention.
Es de poner en práctica una intención buena.
And that ultimately the intention doesn't mean anything unless you actually make it real.
Pero en realidad esa buena intención no va a ningún lado hasta que lo hayas aplicado.
And for me, I believe that one of the things that needs to be revived is that sensibility.
Y para mí lo que creo que se tiene que reavivar es esta sensibilidad.
Now, what's the significance of permaculture? Because this was supposed to be also about permaculture.
Ahora empezamos con lo de la permacultura.
I believe permaculture to be one of the systems among others that, again, operate along certain similar ethical thinking. I believe permaculture to be a contemporary means by which to operationalize a good intention.
Yo creo que la permacultura es una de las vías que existe hoy en día de poner en práctica esta ética, de esta buena intención.
Right. So permaculture, for those who aren't familiar with it, is a design science that was developed by a gentleman named Bill Mollison in the 1970s, also along with David Holmgren. Actually, I'll show a picture. That's him in the corner. And he kind of looks like, if you didn't know anybody, he kind of looks like a Hanafi. Or maybe it was Shafi, maybe.
Este es el hombre que fundó, bueno, que ha creado esta palabra permacultura, que quiere decir como la agricultura permanente. Bill Mollison, era un australiano.
So he's in commenting on what inspired him to pull together the ideas that make up permaculture. He said, in the early 1970s, it dawned on me that no one had ever applied design to agriculture. I think that's not entirely accurate.
Él escribió era el cofundador de la ciencia del diseño de permacultura, que básicamente es una ciencia de diseño.
But I understand where he's coming from.
Y él escribió en los primeros años de los años 70, me he dado cuenta de que nadie había aplicado el diseño a la agricultura, pero él dice que realmente eso no es de verdad.
So he said, when I realized that the hairs went up on the back of my neck.
Cuando me he dado cuenta, se me puso los pelos de punta.
It was so strange.
Era tan raro.
We'd had agriculture for 7,000 years.
Hemos tenido agricultura durante 7,000 años.
And we'd been losing for 7,000 years.
Y durante 7,000 años hemos estado perdiendo.
Everything was turning into desert.
Todo estaba convirtiéndose en desierto.
So I wondered, can we build systems that obey ecological principles?
Entonces me pregunté, ¿podemos construir sistemas que obedecen a principios ecológicos?
We know what they are, we just never apply them.
Sabemos qué son, solo que nunca los ponemos en práctica.
Ecologists never apply good ecology to their gardens.
Los ecologistas nunca ponen en práctica, nunca aplican la buena ecología a sus jardines.
Architects never understand the transmission of heat in buildings.
Los arquitectos nunca comprenden la transmisión del calor en los edificios.
And physicists live in houses with demented energy systems.
Y los físicos viven en casas que tienen sistemas de energía demenciales.
And I think it's this last sentence that really, I think, caps it. It's curious that we never apply what we know to how we actually live.
Es curioso que nunca aplicamos lo que sabemos a cómo realmente vivimos.
So in defining permaculture, he provides a definition I like to use that comes from his designer's manual. Permaculture is actually the combination of two words, permanent and agriculture. Okay. So the idea basically is if you can create a permanence in agriculture, you can potentially create a permanence in human culture.
Entonces lo que él ha hecho es coger dos palabras, agricultura permanente, y los fusionó para decir permacultura, porque con la idea de que si podemos lograr una agricultura permanente, o sea, continua, sostenible, podemos llegar a tener una civilización o una sociedad, una existencia humana continua también, permanente.
So permaculture is the practical, conscious design and maintenance of agriculturally productive ecosystems, which have the diversity, stability, and resilience of natural ecosystems.
Entonces, la permacultura es el diseño práctico y consciente y mantenimiento de ecosistemas agriculturalmente productivos que tienen la diversidad, estabilidad y resiliencia de los ecosistemas naturales.
It is the harmonious integration of landscape and people, providing their food, energy, shelter, and other material and non-material needs in a sustainable way.
es la integración armoniosa de terreno y personas, proveyendo su comida, energía, abrigo y otras necesidades materiales y no materiales de una manera sostenible.
Permaculture as a design system attempts to integrate fabricated, natural, spatial, temporal, social, and ethical parts or components to achieve a functional whole.
Como un sistema de diseño, la permacultura intenta integrar componentes fabricados, naturales, espaciales, temporales, sociales y éticos para lograr un total funcional.
To do so, it concentrates not on the components themselves, but on the relationships between them and on how they function to assist each other.
Para hacer eso, se enfoca no en los componentes en sí mismos, pero en las relaciones que hay entre ellos y en sus funciones, cómo funcionan para ayudar uno al otro.
It is in the arrangement of parts, that design has its being and function, and it is the adoption of a purpose which decides the direction of design.
Es en el arrangement de ubicación, organización de las partes. Esta es en la organización de las partes que el diseño tiene su ser y su función, y es la adopción de un propósito que decide la dirección del diseño.
Okay, so that's a formal definition of permaculture. But the thing that makes permaculture, I think, unique among, I think, sort of modern design systems is this being guided by an ethical sensibility, right? It's guided by ethics. So
esa es una definición de permacultura técnica, pero ahora lo podemos conocer como un sistema de diseño que tiene que ver con la ética.
And I think it's not really any different than what you saw expressed as guiding the Filaha tradition. So the first ethic is care of the earth.
Que no difiere mucho, no es muy diferente a lo que hemos visto de la tradición de Filaha. Primero, es el cuidado de la tierra.
Right, so the basic idea behind the explanation of care of the earth is we're safe, or I'm safe if the earth is safe. I'm taken care of if the earth is taken care of. I'm in danger if the earth is in danger.
O sea, que yo estoy seguro, la tierra está segura. Si yo estoy en peligro, también la tierra va a estar en peligro. Todo es recíproco.
Right, so this extends then to care of people. So same understanding. I'm safe if you are safe. I'm taken care of if you're taken care of. I'm in danger if you're in danger.
La segunda parte es el cuidado de las personas, y es lo mismo. Si yo tengo seguridad, tú tienes seguridad. Si yo estoy cuidado, tú estás cuidado. Si yo estoy en peligro, tú estás en peligro.
And then the last ethic is fair share or reinvestment of the surplus.
Y el último es compartir de forma justa o reinvertir el sobrante.
Right, so the surplus is whatever is generated from these systems that are being constructed to, again, provision our lives. And so the surplus is reinvested back into the system for the care of the earth and the care of people.
Todo lo que sobra de estos sistemas que creamos para proveer, ¿no? Para provisionar, se reinvierte para el cuidado de la tierra y cuidado de las personas.
Right, and I really see this as being an extension or a contemporary expression of this idea of wishing for others or doing for others what I would like to be done for me.
Esta es como una expresión contemporánea de esta misma idea de que yo quiero para los demás lo que quiero para mí misma.
Right, so, and then from the ethics are derived a number of principles that direct design, or thinking of design. And then those principles are actually derived from observations of nature or natural systems.
Y de ahí, de esas, los principios de la ética, tenemos los principios de diseño, y estos vienen de observar la naturaleza.
Right, so, for example, there are 12 in this list. There are 12 the different versions, but this one is probably as good as any to use. The first principle is observe and interact.
A veces espera 12 principios, pero estos 6 son suficientes. El primero es observar y interactuar.
The second principle is catch and store energy.
Segundo principio es de captar o cosechar y almacenar la energía.
The third is obtain a yield.
El tercero es obtener un... ¿Cómo se dice?
Basically,
Un rendimiento.
Yeah.
Un rendimiento, ¿no? Una cosecha, ¿no? Como...
The fourth is apply self-regulation and accept feedback.
El cuarto principio es autorregular y aceptar feedback.
Retroalimentación.
¿Cómo? Retroalimentación. ¿Se dice así?
Sí, sí, sí.
Ok, gracias.
The fifth is use and value renewable resources and services.
El quinto principio, utiliza y valora recursos y servicios renovables.
Right. The sixth, produce no waste.
El sexto, no producir nada de mal gasto.
The seventh is to design from patterns to details.
El séptimo, diseñar desde los patrones hasta los detalles.
The eighth, integrate rather than segregate.
Octavo, integrar en vez de segregar.
9 is to use small and slow solutions.
El noveno, utiliza soluciones lentas y pequeñas.
10 is to use and value diversity.
El décimo, utiliza y valora la diversidad.
11 is to use edges and value the marginal.
El octavo, ¿cómo se llama? Onceavo, utiliza los bordes y valora lo marginal.
And 12 is to creatively use and respond to change.
El duodécimo, utiliza creativamente y responder al cambio.
Now, it's funny, in knowing a little bit about the Filaha tradition and seeing these principles, what's funny is you saw pretty much everything that's mentioned here actually at work in Al-Andalus, 1,000 years earlier.
Lo interesante es que, dado todo lo que hemos visto de la época islámica aquí en España, ya hemos visto todo eso. Ya lo hemos visto en acción.
And I think in particular, the ones that immediately jumped out at me was this point about using and valuing diversity, using edges and valuing the marginal, right? Integrating rather than segregating.
Y algunos detalles ahí que cabe destacar, como utilizar y valorar la diversidad, utilizar los bordes y valorar lo marginal, integrar en vez de segregar.
Because one of the things that marked the system of Filaha in Al-Andalus was this incredible diversity of output and products, which was reflective of all of the different kinds of people you had in this place.
Una de las cosas más notables de Al-Andalus era la diversidad increíble de los productos que se producieron, que era también el resultado de la mezcla, el mestizaje y las comunidades tan diversas que estaban en Al-Andalus.
And again, what immediately jumped out is the Quranic ayah explaining that we've been made in different tongues and tribes and clans and peoples, right? Not so that we would be separate. He said so that we would come to know one another.
Y también nos hacen pensar en otra ley coránica que dice que os hemos creado en diferentes pueblos, diferentes naciones y tribus para que os conozcáis.
And again, I believe this is proof positive of what happens when you actually you are operating according to belief in this truth, and that this is something that if you actually put it into use, if you actually apply it, you can see what's possible. That this was an amazing achievement in human civilization, and it was animated, it was catalyzed by people acting upon this truth that was being brought to us by this man, the Prophet Muhammad. So the last thing I want to highlight for those who are interested in some of the technical particulars of what made Moorish Spain so successful, these are the 4 foundational principles that were highlighted in G.T. Wrench's book. Again, the one thing I would add is the species diversity as well. That there was, again, this amazing diversity of species in Muslim Spain, but intelligent management and distribution of water, small independent land holdings, the rule of return or the reinvestment of waste to restore fertility, and terraced cultivation. These were the sort of the hallmarks of Moorish agriculture, the Muslim agriculture.
Estos son los puntos que ha destacado el autor del primer libro que hemos mirado. A esto se puede añadirle también la diversidad de las especies que se cultivaron aquí, pero se basa en el management. I never know the word for that. La gestión, gracias. Gestión inteligente y distribución de agua. Minifundios independientes y pequeños, sí, de pequeños propietarios. La ley de reinvertir los desechos para devolver la fertilidad y cultivar en bancales.
Okay, so actually, I'd much rather hear questions or get some input from the audience rather than hear myself talk. So, was there anything of particular interest, questions, comments, reflections that any of you may have had about some of what was presented, or perhaps you have some additional input you would like to offer? I mean, this could go on and on, but I'd like to hear from all of you.